I spent months planning the perfect 7-day vacation in Asia for my parents. Flights, luxury hotels, cultural tours, I had it all covered. But when I went to pick them up for the airport, they hit me with a bombshell. They'd decided to go with my jobless brother, Ben, instead of me. Ben really needs this trip, my mom said, smiling as if nothing was wrong. He's been going through a lot lately, and he really needs a change of scenery. I stood there frozen. What? But I planned everything. I paid for it all. I couldn't believe my ears. Ben didn't even bother to look guilty as he casually loaded his suitcase into the car. Thanks for understanding, sis, he said with that smug grin of his. My mom waved me off. You're always so busy with work. You can go on a trip later. Ben needs this now. My heart sank. I had spent the last year saving every penny to make this dream trip happen. And now, they were taking him instead. I clenched my jaw and forced a smile. Fine. If that's what you want. Go ahead. I got in the car without another word, trying to ignore the sting of betrayal. The drive to the airport was unbearably silent, except for Ben rambling about all the shopping he was going to do in Tokyo. Hey, Mom, do you think we'll have time to hit up Shibuya? He asked, as if he hadn't just stolen my trip from under me. My mom chuckled, totally oblivious to my frustration. Of course. We'll have time, Ben. Don't worry about it. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, trying to hold back my anger. At one point, my dad cleared his throat and muttered, "Thanks for driving us, sweetie." But it felt hollow. You know this is messed up, right? I finally said, barely able to keep my voice steady. My mom just shrugged. Don't make this a big deal, honey. Ben needs a break more than you do. I bit back the hurtful words that threatened to spill out. This was supposed to be a family trip, something special for us to share. But instead, I was just a person who had to chauffeur them around. By the time we reached the airport, I could barely contain my rage. Thanks for understanding, my mom said, giving me a hug. But the words felt empty. Ben shot me one last fake smile. You're the best, sis. I'll send you a postcard. I watched them walk into the terminal, my heart heavy with anger. As soon as I got home, I pulled up my laptop, logged into every travel account, and canceled everything. The flights, the hotels, the tour, I deleted it all. If they were going to take Ben instead of me, fine. They wouldn't be enjoying a 5-star vacation on my dime. I didn't regret it. Not even for a second. The phone calls started as soon as their plane landed. My phone buzzed relentlessly, but I didn't answer. Instead, I unpacked my suitcase and let the calls pile up. Finally, I answered one. My mom's voice exploded through the phone. What did you do? The hotel won't let us check in. The reservations are gone. I could barely keep from laughing. Oh, I'm sorry. I canceled everything. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Why would you do that? She demanded, her voice rising. Because you decided to take Ben on my trip. I worked for this. I saved for this. And you just threw it all away for him. Violet, please. We thought you'd understand. Understand? That everything I did meant nothing? That Ben's needs are more important than mine? I could feel my anger rising. No, I don't understand. And I don't care to. I hung up, tossing my phone onto the couch. The silence that followed was blissful. Finally, I felt like I could breathe. By the next morning, my phone was blowing up again. But this time, I didn't even care. They'd made their choice. Let them figure out the rest of the trip. As for me, I was done. I opened my phone and took a deep breath, preparing myself for the onslaught of messages. Violet, you've crossed the line. Your brother's furious. Your father's upset. And we can't get any of the flights you booked. This is a disaster. Came from my mom. Then, you're being dramatic. Just fix this already from Ben. Finally, a text from my dad. We need to talk. This isn't right. I set the phone down, staring at the screen, a feeling of disbelief and frustration simmering inside me. For years, I had been the one trying to hold everything together, picking up the pieces. And now that I had stepped back, they had no idea how to handle it. I poured myself a cup of coffee, and as I sat at the kitchen table, the anger began to rise. How could they expect me to clean up this mess? How dare they make me feel like the one in the wrong? The next call came minutes later, and this time I answered. Violet, My mom's voice was sharp before I even said anything. This isn't funny anymore. We're stranded. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the bitterness settle. Embarrassing? You think this is embarrassing? Try spending your saving planning, and then being told you're not even part of the trip you paid for. Stop being dramatic, she snapped. Ben needed this more than you. He's jobless, you know. I clenched my jaw. You made your choice. Mom, you decided to take Ben instead of me. Fine. But don't expect me to fund his vacation. We're family, remember? Don't be so cold, Violet, she said. We don't do this to each other. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing. Ben's whiny voice in the background added, just hang up on her, Mom. She's being impossible. That was the last straw. Enjoy your trip, I said, my tone ice cold. Oh, wait. You can't. It's not your trip anymore. It was mine. And now it's no one's. Goodbye. I hung up before she could reply and turned my phone off. For the rest of the evening, I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. I wasn't going to be the family fixer anymore. They could call me dramatic all they wanted, but for once, I wasn't letting them walk all over me. The next few days passed in a calm silence. With my phone turned off, I finally had space to think clearly, free from their constant guilt trips. I spent my mornings sipping coffee and my afternoons catching up on neglected projects. It was refreshing to focus on things that reminded me of my own capabilities, not those of someone else. But curiosity eventually got the best of me, and I turned my phone back on. There were dozens of voicemails. The first few were from my mom, growing more frantic with each one. Violet, you need to call me back right now. This has gone too far. You've humiliated us. Then Ben, his voice dripping with entitlement. This is so petty. Fix it, Violet. And finally, my dad, quieter but no less disappointed. Violet, I don't understand what happened to you. Call us back so we can sort this out. I listened to the final voicemail. My mom, tired and frustrated, said, Violet, we're back at the airport. The trip's ruined. Your brother's devastated. Your father and I, well, disappointed doesn't even begin to cover it. Call us when you're ready to talk. I deleted the voicemails without replying. I wasn't ready to talk to them, and I didn't know if I ever would be. This wasn't just about a trip, it was the culmination of years of being overlooked, being expected to be the one to make things work, and constantly putting Ben's needs before mine. The next evening, Grace showed up with 2 cups of coffee. She set them on the table, her curiosity written all over her face. I heard what happened, she said, taking a seat. Your mom called me yesterday. Of course she did, I replied, rolling my eyes. I told her you were probably busy and would get back to her when you were ready. I laughed, shaking my head. You're the best! No, Grace said seriously. You're the best. You finally stood up for yourself. Don't let them drag you back down. Her words stuck with me long after she left. I had spent too long trying to please people who never seemed to care about my efforts. It was time to break that cycle. I wasn't their fixer anymore. By the time the weekend came, I felt a new sense of clarity. The anger was still there, but it was joined by something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. Freedom from their expectations. Freedom to live for myself. But as expected, the silence didn't last. Sunday afternoon, I answered the phone. It was my dad. Violet. His voice was heavy. Your mom wanted me to call. She thinks. Go on, I said, leaning back in my chair. He sighed. This has all gotten out of hand. Your mom's upset. Ben's furious, and it's just a mess. But you're better than this. I laughed bitterly. Better than what, Dad? Standing up for myself? Refusing to let you walk all over me? That's not what I meant, he said quickly. You've always been the one to keep everything together. This isn't like you. I snapped. You're right. It's not like me, because I'm not cleaning up your mess anymore. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear him trying to figure out how to fix it. But I wasn't interested in being fixed anymore. When my parents and Ben finally returned, I was waiting for them at their house. I watched them drag their suitcases from the taxi, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and frustration. Ben spoke first. Well, I hope you're happy, Violet. Happy about what? I raised an eyebrow, staying seated on the porch swing. Your trip was a disaster? Sounds like you've had plenty of time to bond. My mom shot back. You knew we couldn't afford everything you planned. You set us up to fail. I stood up, setting my coffee down. No, Mom. I didn't set you up for anything. I planned a trip for all of us, something special. But you decided to cut me out at the last second. My dad finally spoke, his tone defensive. What do you think? That trips like that just happen? They take planning. I've been the one planning everything for years. I said, my voice steady but firm. The one fixing everything. And you've taken it all for granted. My mom opened her mouth, but I held up a hand to stop her. No, Mom. What's not fair is how you've treated me. You chose Ben every time, every holiday, every family gathering, and I've always been the one to sacrifice. There was a long silence. I let it sit, feeling lighter than I had in years. When I returned to my house, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't expected. I made a cup of tea and replayed the confrontation in my mind. For once, they had been the ones stunned, the ones who didn't know what to say. I had finally stood up for myself. Weeks later, my mom sent a message. Hope you had a nice trip. Maybe we can talk soon. I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the keyboard. I wasn't ready to respond, and that was okay. This time, it was on my terms.